And we have a special guest with us. I'm here with Michelle, and our special guest is Michelle's therapist. So, welcome, Michelle. I have to say, I think this is going to be very confusing for me about Michelle and Michelle. So, Sister Michelle, I'm just going to call you Sister Michelle for the podcast, okay? And Michelle, you're Michelle. So, welcome, Michelle. Sister Michelle, I'm going to throw it off to you.
Yes, I wanted to bring on, I've mentioned my therapist several times, and I just wanted to bring her on and have her discuss the ins and outs of EMDR, because all I know is what I've experienced myself, and I know that it is such great therapy. I know for a fact that it saved my life. Michelle has saved my life. I've gotten so low many times, and she has just taken me out every time and out of the lows. And I just wanted to bring her on and give her all the love and tell her thank you, and have her speak about EMDR. So in starting that, what got you interested in EMDR, and how did you hear about it?
So I heard about it through my best girlfriend, probably 25 years ago almost. She just was so distraught with me, how messed up I was emotionally, just all over the map, and so she was like, Michelle, I heard of this therapy. She had done it. And that's really good because I have trauma in my past, which I'll share. Well, I'll just say it now. I was raped when I was 17. An intruder, a stranger, broke into our apartment, lived in Orange, California at the time, and woke up at 3 a.m. to this person on my floor. And luckily I was not physically harmed. But of course the emotional trauma was horrendous. And almost worse, the way the police treated me back then. It was I was born in 1962, so this was 1979. I was 17, April 17th. I'll never forget the day. Wow. And the police accused me of knowing the guy, that he was my boyfriend. So anyway, it went on and on. They didn't believe me. They thought I was false, but I went to UCI, did the rape kit and all that. They had the DNA, and I actually called the Orange Police Department a couple of years ago because it had been 35 plus years, whatever, and I wanted to know if they still had the DNA, if they've caught anybody. I never got a call back, and I didn't really pursue it, but I was curious because they had the DNA. Anyway, that happened and shattered me. Of course, I really had struggled functioning, and I had PTSD really badly. My mom took me to a therapist, an elderly psychologist who was, probably Freudian trained, and he was no help. He did not know how to talk to a teenager. He knew nothing about victimization, nothing about rape he was not the right one. It was my mom's therapist. And so that was an interesting experience. I tried others and had a lot of family disruption. My father left my mother when I was 9 and had cheating with my stepmom, and they married, and then he tried to do a blended family, and that was a whole lot of trauma in itself. And then actually that's what led me to be a therapist, which I'll share, and then I'll get back to the EMDR. When I was, we had family therapy when I was a teenager. My father forced us to move to Santa Barbara for a few years because my mom was severely depressed. She was depressed forever. She never really got over him leaving her, although she did marry 20 years later and had a 19-year marriage, which was 2 years longer than she was married to my father and I. Anyway, we went to therapy, and it was with 2 therapists, a couple that were members of our church, and they were friends of my dad's. So right off the bat, conflict of interest. They shouldn't have been seeing us. And I had a stepbrother and a stepsister at the time, and my stepbrother was a criminal. He was breaking into stores downtown Santa Barbara, doing drugs, hiding drugs. And so they lumped us all together, and they thought that we were doing it too. And they would do searches of our rooms. And the therapist called us in the session one time candy-coated pieces of shit, because we would, present like, well, we're not doing it, because we weren't. Not that we hadn't smoked here and there, but we weren't dealing like he was, anyway. So I thought, oh, that was a huge moment in my life that made me want to be a therapist, actually. And I don't remember how old, maybe 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there. So I said, oh, I don't want any child to go through this kind of trauma from a therapist. This is uncalled for. And I made a decision, and I knew about LCSWs. That's what I am. So I'll share that too, is I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And I knew that that was a really strong degree to have a master's degree in social work. It's nationally very solid, well-known in every state. Unlike, there's some master's degrees that are just not as well known and not as solid. So I ended up eventually doing that in 1990, studying at USC, where my mother was a librarian, medical librarian, and we thought my education was going to be free. And then we found out that the government was taxing it. So it still only cost half as much back then, which was 22,000, and now it's like over 105,000. So it still was a lot less back then. Anyway,
Wow.
Back to EMDR. So then my friend recommended it. I never got treated, for the trauma for being raped. And that, trauma carries over, right? If we don't deal with it and clean it out, which is what EMDR does, and I'll talk about that, it just carries over. And so fast forward to 1992, I was at lunch with my he was going to be my husband. We were dating and went to lunch, broad daylight in San Bernardino. We worked at the county mental health, San Bernardino County. And at lunch, he went to his car. I went to mine. I don't know why he didn't walk me to mine. He usually did. And there were two men there at my car with guns. Well, I don't know if they had guns. They had, like, they were pointed in their shirt, like that. Like, so it could have been a gun. Maybe they weren't, but two of them. And it was Marie Callender's on Highland Avenue. And one was kind of by the building and one was at my car. They were waiting for me. And so they robbed me. They wanted everything I had. I had been studying karate at the time. So my karate instructor, had trained us. You give them what they want first, right off the bat. You appease the assaulters, right? So I'm like totally stressed out, flipping credit cards out of my wallet, and cash. I only had like $25. I'm like, here, I just gave them everything. I'm like, here, have it all. And they weren't happy. They were mad. I didn't have more money. Sorry, I didn't go to the ATM before I went to lunch, Anyway, that happened, and it threw me into extreme PTSD. I had trouble working. I'd be in bed. I couldn't be alone. John, my boyfriend, he had to be with me. I just couldn't sleep. I was scared to death. So after that, I saw a therapist again, but still, she didn't do EMDR. It wasn't really known about. 1992. So it was discovered in 1987. And I could have had it in 80. No. Yeah, I could have had it, earlier, but they didn't. It wasn't known until my friend in like 1998 maybe told me about it. It was that many years later that I suffered all those years. It was discovered in 1987 by a woman named Dr. Francine Shapiro, who was from the East Coast, I think from New York, and she was trained. She was, I think, in literature prior to becoming a psychologist. And she moved out to the West Coast and was in Santa Clara, Northern California, when she discovered it. She was anxious. She had had some cancer, a cancer diagnosis and cancer treatment when she lived on the East Coast. And when she came out to California, she had a lot of anxiety, from coping, well, just the effects of the feelings from being diagnosed with cancer. And she was walking in a park one day in Santa Clara, and I visited this park with one of my colleagues who practices up there, EMDR. I met him at a conference, at an EMDR conference, and she was walking in the park, and she just moved her eyes back and forth between the trees, these oak trees, and she felt calmer. And she did it again, and she felt calmer. And she went back to school and started researching, and she developed the protocol for it. It's the EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And she started writing books and publishing papers. She was very strong on research based, proving, having data. And she passed away just a few years ago. We haven't lost her very long ago. And she just has been an instrumental person and very devoted to donating. We have there's an association I want to tell people about called EMDRIA, which is EMDRIA, the EMDR International Association. And there's a website, emdria.org. And it has like resources on it for therapists. You can find a therapist in your area. It has an explanation of EMDR. It has the publications. It has lots and lots of research. And there's one, I think it's called HAP. It's what do you call it? Humanitarian Assistance Program. That's what it stands for. Humanitarian Assistance Program, where help is donated to people all over the world, and therapists, like I'm signed up in my region to help if there's a crisis or a natural disaster or catastrophe, fire, flood, whatever, shooting, which is so common now, to go help people in the community free of cost. And we do it all over the world. We have teams that go all over the world. So it's really spread because it works. And we're going to talk today about how it works and why. That'll be another segment. Does that help kind of frame it for us, do you think?
Yes, awesome. Thank you.
And then, of course,
So-
I eventually had it. So, I had it to completely resolve my rape trauma completely. I can share about that if anyone's interested. It's super cool.
Yes. So your friend mentioned that type of therapy to you. So did you go to her therapist or
Right away. Right away.
away?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then what worked for you? Was it tapping or eye movement, back and forth? So for me, we did the eye movements. That's what helped me, following your fingers. But when I was pregnant, it was too much, and so you tapped on me.
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what helps for you? And
What-
then where do you go? How did it?
I remember my
explode?
therapist tapping on me. I remember she pulled up her chair and because it's been years ago now, and she would tap on my knees. That's what we do. One modality. That's one way. I
That's
don't remember
how many different modalities are there for EMDR?
there are several. My cat wants to say hi. Nova, say hi to everybody. Yeah, he has to get on my lap when I have
Yay.
sessions here or whatever. Yeah, so there's eye movements where, and actually I do it here with my clients on Zoom. I have a lot of success. There's a white area. I take all the stuff down in the back, so it's just a blank area. And I just move my fingers to have them follow with their eyes. And then there's a protocol of like how many times and how many sets, depending on what they're dealing with and all that. And then there's the tapping on, I have people online do this, tapping on their shoulders, and closing their eyes is often the best, most helpful. There are TheraTappers, which are like vibrating. I also call them buzzies. I used to work with a lot of kids in person. Now I'm online, and kids really need in-person therapies. But I had these TheraTappers, and they would vibrate, buzz back and forth, buzz, 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 buzz. So they would hold them in their hands, or I'd put them in their shoes or their socks if they were fidgety and didn't hold them. Or I'd have these dinosaur puppets, and I'd put them in the puppets' mouths, and so make it fun for the kids to do it with them. You can get so creative with how it's just the bilateral stimulation for the brain is what calms the limbic system part of the brain, which is the emotional part of the brain, and helps to be able to think. Let me explain that real quick, if I can. The limbic system is the bottom portion of the brain, and then this is the prefrontal cortex on the top. So the bilateral stimulation in the brain calms down the limbic system, which needs calming because when it's activated, so say somebody's traumatized, your limbic system is slammed with trauma, upset, and reacts emotionally. And then our brains kick out a chemical called norepinephrine, which shuts down the prefrontal cortex so that we can't think straight, right? That's why when you get upset, you can't think, right? Everything's a jumble. So the EMDR calms that limbic system down, the emotional part of the brain, so that we can think and reason And also we start with, the setup is what negative beliefs do you have about yourself? There's a cognitive portion and emotions. We want to know where you feel it in your body. There's three things: body, where do you feel it? Mostly stomach, for women especially. Thoughts, what's a negative belief about yourself? I'm not deserving, I'm not worthy of love, I'm defective, whatever it is. I'm not good enough, I'm not in control. There are a variety of, and we have sort of sections of thoughts that we present to our clients. The third is emotions. What do you feel? Sadness, anxiety, whatever. And so we work with those three components. And so eventually the outcome, why EMDR is so successful, is we can process. So the brain is processing also memories while it's calming down the limbic system. We call them memory networks in our brain. And so it's sort of organizing them and reworking them and processing the negative beliefs into positive. So a person will go from thinking horrible things about themselves, like I'm not deserving of love, to believing I am deserving of love, or whatever the negative belief is. And we have a scale where we measure. I'll ask the clients for the emotions, how upset do you feel on a 0 to 10 scale? We call it the subjective units of distress scale. And 0 is nothing, is no disturbance, and 10 is the most. And then we track it throughout the course of treatment, which is different for everybody. However long it takes, it's different. And then we have a belief scale for the beliefs of 1 to 7. 1 is is it false that I don't believe I'm not good enough, to 7, it's true, I do believe I'm not good enough. And then we do that with the positive thought as well. So just kind of a nutshell, so you understand how it works. So we're monitoring throughout the treatment, which is part of the research, how it's research based, and we can get data to prove the effectiveness of EMDR.
That's wonderful. So you're saying I'm going back to the beginning of it. So you're saying that your therapist tapped on your knees, and you closed your eyes and relived your trauma. Is that how it went?
I did. I'll share that. The other modality I didn't mention is we have a light bar. I think that you've seen in my office, right? I don't know if you ever used it, Michelle. I can't remember.
Yes, I did try it. It was too much.
Yeah.
I went back to, it was too, I couldn't concentrate. It was too distracting. So we went back to your fingers, and I followed your fingers, and I was able to close my eyes and concentrate. Or no, I couldn't close my eyes. I was watching your fingers, but it felt like I had my eyes closed, like I was reliving things. But yeah, just watching.
You may have done some tapping too. We may have. I don't remember. I'm imagining. I mean, we did a lot of EMDR.
Yes, a lot.
Yeah, but there's this light bar and has the lights going back and forth. So that's some people like that. And then you can adjust the speed and intensity. So so when I did my rape, the trauma processing, it was in 2 sessions or less. I mean, it was max. It was not more than 2 sessions. And what ended up happening, which is the coolest example, I think, of how EMDR works and transforms negative feelings, experiences, and thoughts into positive, is I'm pretty sure my negative belief was I'm not in control. I'm pretty sure, or I'm powerless, something like that. But in the second session, when we were really reliving, and she had me, focus on whatever it was I focused on, because that's what we do also. I didn't mention that, is we have a picture that everyone focuses on, if they can come up with one. If they can't, we work with whatever we can, the feeling in the stomach or thought or whatever. But it's best if a picture can be focused on, and then the feelings and the body sensation. So I don't remember what I focused on. Probably seeing him there was probably the most traumatic thing. And so I relived it. And what ended up happening is my best girlfriend, who told me about EMDR, she has a wonderful husband, Michael, and they've been married now over 26 years, I think. And he's a big burly guy, a contractor, and really loving, like a big bear, right? Like loving hard. And So he's always been there for me, you know, car problems, anything like stuff with my house maintenance, you know, anything I've been a single mom for 25 years now, single. So anyway, so I'm experiencing reliving the rape in my mind as she's tapping. Michael came and he chased the rapist away.
Wow.
And I was done because he rescued me. And that was it. I can talk about it now, just like I'm talking about it. It doesn't bring up any disturbance level, which is what we always check with our clients about, right? Do you feel any disturbance when you think about that memory? Or,
Yes.
So it's like magic. I've always said it's like magic.
Yes. So it's the eye movement, bilateral eye movement, and you imagining the situation that happened. This is for PTSD. But it also works for I mean, I guess everyone has some sort of PTSD in some way, which causes.
True.
So, for example, for me, if something's bothering me, I would go to you on our session and tell you something that was just bothering me, where I was in my life at that time, and we would do EMDR on that particular thing that was bothering me. It wasn't like a something traumatic or anything. It was just something that was bothering me. But through the eye movement, the bilateral eye movement, I would think about the thing that was bothering me, but then it would turn into the root cause of why it was bothering me without me even knowing. Just thinking about it, I wouldn't think about it. I wouldn't know what it was, but through the eye movement, the bilateral, it, I would, it would just happen. I would be like, oh, that's why it bothered me, because of this that happened so many years ago. And then we would, so just for example, you would I would follow your fingers. It's not hypnotizing, it's not hypnotherapy, because I want to clarify that, because some people might think following your fingers, they're gonna like be hypnotized, but I don't go to that state. I don't even know how they do it in hypnotherapy, but it's just following your fingers, and I would think about the thing that was bothering me, and then just by thinking, it's like a controlled what's it called, like a controlled way of letting your brain go crazy, but it's controlled because you're going on a specific trail, and you end up discovering what it is that's causing you to have an issue right now. And then we would stop, and you would say, okay, and I would tell you what was happening in my mind through those movements, and then you would say, okay, let's go with that, and then you do your sets, and then I'd follow your fingers, and then I would just follow, my brain would just go thinking about whatever that was, and it would just get deeper and deeper until I was able to discover what it was, and then we'd work through it, and then we'd talk about it. So it wasn't just EMDR, eye movement, okay, let's leave. You would help me process it through talking about it.
Through talk
as
therapy.
well.
Exactly. And it can be used for anything. It's
Anything.
great with grief, people that get stuck in their grief after losing
Yeah.
somebody, countless things, anything, honestly, anything.
Yeah, I remember going through that with when our dad passed away. Me picturing him in the hospital when I thought I've never seen a real, like, I've been to funerals where it's an open casket and you see the person, but they have makeup on, they have, you know, the title of the person that does the beautician, or they would put, they made them look presentable. So I've never seen the actual dead body, and that haunted me afterwards, seeing him in the hospital. And so working with you through that, I would imagine going to the hospital and seeing him, and I followed your fingers through EMDR, and it wasn't, so it was helping me to where I could picture him in the hospital right now, and I'm not crying. I'm not,
Yeah.
it doesn't change the fact that it happened, but it doesn't bring that pain and that emotion of grief that, like you said,
Exactly. It reduces that level of sadness.
yeah,
It reduces
I,
the level of
yeah,
disturbance.
it took 3 times for me to see you and work on that particular subject of that trauma for me. Uh, so it wasn't like traumatic to where it was a trigger of something else that happened. So it was just me reliving it, following your fingers, and helping my brain process it correctly, instead of storing the memories and not knowing what to do with it. And
Yeah,
anytime I imagined it or pictured it or anything else was brought up that made me think of that, I would just cry, and it was too much. Um, but yes, I had to do it 3 times with you, and now I can relive that day in my head, but it's not.
as disturbing,
Yeah,
as
thank you.
upsetting. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
A great testimony, Michelle, to the effectiveness of EMDR. You have,
And the different things that, like with you, the rape, of course you needed to relive that and get through it to where you could talk about it and not get emotional and not be upset. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't change what happened, but it helps you with just coping and not being able to.
exactly, not being a mess, not
Yeah,
having this trauma in your brain. And when we have unprocessed trauma in our brains, we don't know what to do. It's disorganized, right? I mean, yeah, so I was making all kinds of poor decisions, which I'm not going to share on this podcast. But
Hey, Michelle, do you know that this is called Sister Confession? So now it's time to confess. Well, actually, now that Sister Michelle, now that we have your captive, maybe she should she knows where all the bodies are buried here. Michelle
she
confess.
does. She knows all the secrets.
That's hilarious. That is so funny.
I do want to say we're on episode 15, and Michelle has pretty much every episode, most episodes, has just talked so highly of you and just how therapy has helped her immensely. We're big advocates of therapy here. There's a lot of different modalities, like you're talking about EMDR. I think you had mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy, and I was wondering so I've been to therapy several times throughout my life for situationally, and I guess it helped me kind of just process the situation, but I hadn't really dug too deep into things before. I'm in therapy now, and I'm kind of stuck in a hard part right now, but I've only experienced is cognitive behavioral therapy. Do you use that component when Michelle said, like, after she'd processed with the eye movements, then you guys would verbally process, and that's like combining both of those modalities? Or
Absolutely. They're wonderful to combine because just a quick example of cognitive behavioral therapy that's so commonly used, that's really helpful, is thought stopping. Just stopping that negative belief when you have it, when you think about it. And I mentioned some of those: I'm not good enough, or this person dislikes me, or whatever it is. Stop that and reframe it. Switch it up to something positive. Well, I am good enough. I am worthy. I am, you know, it doesn't matter what they think of me. I believe in myself. I'm confident with what I'm doing or did, or, you know, whatever the situation is, you can change it up and reframe it. And that's something, and research has shown that when people do that over and over again, it does change the pathways in the brain to be able to think more positively. It's very effective. Now, it's not effective as much alone if there's like trauma or something deeply, some emotionally upsetting experiences that a person's had happen in their lifetime. They might need more, but in it combined, it works beautifully, and I use it all the time. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So when you say stopping the negative thoughts and saying something opposite, you don't have to believe it, because a lot of times these negative thoughts is what you really do believe. So I guess because you keep telling yourself these negative things, so you're saying to the redirection. But I remember going through this with you, and I'm like, but I'm telling myself this, but I don't believe that. So it kind of, it doesn't feel like it's working, because I'm like, I'm thinking I'm not good enough, and then I'm like, but you are good enough, and then I like to try to redirect, and then I'm like, but that's not true. You know what I mean? So can you go into more depth about that?
It's a great question, and I'm curious as to if you, I believe you had it happen where it did eventually work, because the more, you know, we can reprogram our brains, right? Like we absolutely can reprogram our brains, and we are learning so much more about the brain now than we ever knew many years ago. And one of those things is to repeat positive thoughts. You know, like how they say, and like, remember Stuart Smalley in his skits on Saturday Night Live, looking in the mirror, I am beautiful, I am a wonderful person, I am, you know, and he was mocking it, but it's really, really true. I've asked countless clients to look in the mirror and try to say, I'm beautiful, I'm wonderful, you know, and they balk at it. It's really hard for a lot of people to do. But over time, and if there's underlying issues that are processed, they can get to that point. Another example I want to give for changing brains, and a strategy that I use a lot in therapy is, and I had a training on this where I learned compassion, just expressing compassion for others, or doing a compassionate act, like going and helping at a food bank or helping someone with something. It actually changes the brain, and it lights, and they've seen that in scans of the brain where areas light up when you are extending or expressing compassion to others, hence resulting in a positive feeling about yourself. So that's scientifically proven now. We can measure these things. We can see what's going on in the brain. It's super cool. And there are so many examples we could give, but I want to ask you, Michelle, did you notice that after, you know, we did work through the underlying, you know, upsets in your life experiences, and did you notice that thinking positively about yourself became a little bit easier? Or how would you describe that?
Yes, it did. So I didn't believe the things you would say. Anytime that you would think that, the almost always in the EMDRs, the belief that would come out of it was, I'm not good enough. Whatever, it didn't matter. Anything would make me think I'm not good enough. And so you would tell me, tell yourself I am good enough, like what you're saying. And I didn't like that, because I didn't believe it. So what I would do is say that, but I didn't believe it. So I needed a example of something that I was good enough at, whatever. And so I would think of, I'm not good enough. Something that would have set me would always go back to, I'm not good enough. And then I would say, you are, and then give myself an example in my head. I would think of something, and then say, like, see, you are. Because before I would just argue in my head, but I would say, you're not good enough, and then I'd be, but you are good enough. Like, let's make it positive. But then I would just think, this is a lie, like this is dumb. So it wasn't very helpful to just think the opposite. I needed an example for myself to believe it, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in doing that, I was able to. It still comes up sometimes, but I know automatically I redirect, like what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is more,
It
it's
doesn't
more
go away, but it is less.
helped.
It
That's okay. Yeah. And there's a
and that's
couple
what I
other ideas.
thought.
I'm sorry.
That's what I thought. I thought everything just goes away, but it doesn't. You just need the
No,
tool.
even for me, I still have to use the tool, right? And so I describe it as our toolbox, right? We have to have a toolbox that, and my diffuser's on right now with my Serenity oil from doTERRA, because that's what helps calm me. And I just like to have it on a lot, and that, aromatherapy is another tool that helps calm our brains, calm our emotions. But I want to share a couple of basic cognitive thoughts that are helpful to help your viewers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some people have a hard time with this one, but something helpful is to know, well, of course you're not alone. That's an easy one that's helpful. There are others suffering like I am with this, whatever issue it is. And knowing also that there are others much worse off than you, and realizing how they're worse off can be helpful. And it's not like you're thinking it at their expense. That's why some people have a hard time with it, but it actually can just make you feel better. And another thought I learned that's really been helpful for me over the years that I've shared with my clients, that I got from being involved in 12-step meetings years ago, is to think if you're really, really having a hard time in a moment, think basically all my needs are met. If you have these things, shelter, clothing, food, electricity, running water. And years ago, I found a statistic that said worldwide, internationally, 85% of the world's population does not have those 5 basic things. So that inevitably helps us to feel better, knowing that we have those things, and then we build on that.
Yes.
I say something about that? Actually, I'm so glad you brought that up, because my husband and I were just talking about this the other day. I've been through my journey of trying the renewal of my mind and try to heal things and identify my limiting beliefs. And so one of my limiting beliefs is that I feel like my feelings aren't valid. Um, and so it's hard for me to bring up things with other people because just like, oh, it doesn't really matter. But also, I think that with my experience as a social worker and seeing like really horrific things happen to others and children, I think of that like, oh, how could I be upset about blah 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 blah, because there's so horrific things going on. And that's my reframe of like, you shouldn't be upset, Desiree, just be grateful for all these things that you have. But then on the same sense, I think that I'm invalidating my feelings. It's like this trick circle I'm in right now. And unfortunately, Michelle is not taking any more clients, because I feel like this session could go on for like 4 hours just with all my issues right now. But it's kind of this weird cycle that I'm in that I haven't been able to break out of, that I've perpetuated through the years. And that's what I do. Like, oh, woe is me, and oh, blah, blah, blah. But other people have it worse. And so just be grateful for who you are. But that's also kind of invalidating my feelings at the same time.
Mm.
That even makes
I
sense.
hear you, and that makes sense. And it's not uncommon. I'm going to suggest EMDR for you, because it'll get to the root. That's what, we didn't really mention, kind of Michelle implied it. It gets to the root of the problem and processes it. And so you're in Ohio, you go on emdria.org and you find a therapist. Click on find a therapist. It's that easy. It's a click away.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
that's
Michelle.
great. Because there's a lot in there, Desiree, of what you said, and I know that a lot of people may go through that of uh not that their feelings are valid because, or not even that, but trying to reframe of saying people have it worse, but then they're beating themselves up because it does bother them. So then they're not even working on the thing that's bothering them. They just stop it. But you have to work on it or else it'll keep happening. And that's what sounds like happening to you, right? You keep hearing, you keep thinking uh, these things that are bothering you, and it keeps coming up because you're not
Digging deep.
processing it.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, we had an episode a little while ago where I did share my one of my strengths is positivity, and I'm great at the reframe, and I'm great at like focusing on the good. Uh, but it's superficial reprocessing, I suppose, rather than why am I feeling that negative feeling in the first place? That wasn't even in my awareness until as of late. Like, okay, I need to dig deeper. And so
Do
yeah,
you journal, Desiree? Do you journal? Because that's another really great tool to explore what you just start writing about what's going on, your thoughts, your feeling, to get to the root of it. It can often, I'm just curious, and whatever you're comfortable sharing.
yes, I love writing. I love journaling. I sometimes when I share my writings with Michelle, I'm like, beware, it's a typical Desiree writing. I mean, because I write a lot, like they're really long.
Good. That's great for you. Yeah.
Me like put things in perspective and process things. Yes, that is a great tool.
Great in a lot of ways. And the biggest, I think, is to not hold it all in, right? Not just in there. Mhm.
yeah, letting it up somehow.
Yeah, releasing and then processing in that way. Mhm.
Great.
So you aren't taking new clients, but are you done?
No, I'm not done working, and I've taken, I took a client this last week, so there are a few I will take here and there. So I won't close the door in case any of your viewers are interested. They have to be in California, reside in California. That's the only state I'm licensed in. It's possible. I'm not done. I can't imagine myself never doing this work. I can't imagine like retiring completely.
Yeah,
But I've had to cut back simply because, as you know, Michelle, I was a workaholic. I mean, and I've been trained, being trained in trauma, like when the Vegas shooting happened, Las Vegas at the concert, half of those people were from Riverside County, and that's where I practice. And I went up to working 6-7 days a week just out of compassion. These poor people couldn't find a therapist, and I was flooded with them, so I ended up just really staying in I felt called to service, so I stepped up and did that. And it took COVID to come out of it. It took COVID to wake me up when I was home working to realize this is crazy. What am I doing? Like, this is just nuts working so much. I want to play with my dogs. I want to swim in my pool. I want to do more things. I want to enjoy my life, and I was on burnout too. COVID helped me realize I had a really high level of burnout, which is common in being a therapist. And I feel like now it's taken several years to kind of work through that, to sort of decompress with a lower caseload. And I'm functioning a lot better and feeling a lot better about being a therapist. And I still get a lot of joy out of it. So I'm not ready to hang it up yet. No, it's
that's
still,
great.
I feel a life purpose and passion,
I love that. That's wonderful, and that's why I love you so much. You're
Mm,
just a beautiful person that wants to help, and you really do care. And I hope everyone finds a Michelle in their life
mm.
because you
Yeah, I have a big heart. I'm very genuine, and that's can be a rare quality in therapists. Everyone, therapists are so different. So some people might really work better with a more logical left brain therapist, somebody really strong on research and, more.
This is how it
stuff
goes.
in-
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not me. I'm more go with the flow, really connecting, forming a relationship. And that's how I was trained in social work school, was the relationship is the foundation. Yeah. And start where the client is, so focusing on you.
Yes. And that's true. I want to put that out there, that there's many different types of therapists. And if you are not feeling that you're getting what you need out of yours, I think it's okay to um, shop around
Shop
or
around. That's
find
right.
find what works for you, because it's all about getting better. And if it's not working, then and it's okay. I don't. Do you take it personal, Michelle, when
No,
people are like, this just isn't for me?
no. Mm-mm. Not at
it
all. I have to admit it was hard at first until I really understood it, hard that clients aren't open, but now I understand most people are not open about sharing that kind of a thing. That'd be really vulnerable they have to be comfortable to say, my needs aren't getting met in therapy with you. That would be really hard. That's hard for most people to say. I don't even know. I've probably heard it once or twice, but not much, considering how many clients I've had in 33 years. I graduated in 1990, so 33
Yeah.
years I've been doing this.
Wow.
Yeah. Especially someone going through therapy because they're trying to um, get better or work on things, so they're not going to be emotionally prepared to break up with their therapist.
Hmm.
But it isn't, it's not really breaking up. I feel like it's finding what works for you. And if it's not working for you, look around, because a therapist are people too, and they all have their own styles, and you have to
Exactly. And you have to
good
be comfortable with that, right?
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So and I can say that because I've seen a handful of therapists. I stopped looking when I found you, but yeah, it never worked for me. It was probably because I didn't find someone. I didn't have a compatible person. Uh, yeah, until I found you, and we've been working on it for 10 years now. Well, we haven't really processed or anything for a year. I've been using I have all the tools in the toolbox, and you used to tell me when I would be going through something, you would be like, what would I tell you, because I've been seeing you for so long, and I'm like, I don't know. That's why I'm here. And you're like, come
Yeah.
on, Michelle. I've been guiding you for 8 years now, and yeah, so I have it now. I have it in my head, and I use it daily, of all the things that you've taught me.
And you're doing well, aren't you? Functioning.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you.
Otherwise, we'd be seeing each other
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Do you have any more questions, Desiree, about EMDR?
No, thank you. That was such a beautiful description of how, like the technicalities of how it works in your body and in your brain. And I think, like when Michelle has talked about it before, it was like the bilateral movements, you help you get to the core of it. But I loved how it was further expanded, of like that kind of ignites the discussion to verbally process it. It's not like this magical thing, okay, this is it, and then you're healed and that's done, but it gets you to the root of the problems to then be able to talk through it and figure things
Mhm.
out.
You actually, Desiree, made me think of something else that might be good to share. Is some people have so much shame with their feelings about themselves or their experiences that they don't want to share verbally, and that's okay. People do not have to, for this to work, for EMDR to work. They can be completely silent, and I've had a few clients like that where they do not share anything, and that's fine.
Okay.
Just keep on process. Mhm.
Wow. Awesome.
That's very interesting. I couldn't, I can't, everyone's different, but I can't imagine doing the EMDR and I need to tell you what's happening so we can talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, I
That's
can't
very
imagine
interesting.
either not sharing. Right. It's such an important part, but you and I are very verbal, and it's such an important part, I think, of even expressing is processing. It's part of the
Right.
processing, right?
But it still works for them.
It
The
does.
EMDR still,
Mhm.
it still works.
I can't
It's
tell you how because they wouldn't share, right? But they got better and didn't come back.
okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Are,
And
are
it,
there any other things? So I know that one time. Okay, so you would tell me what are you feeling? You're upset. So where are you feeling it in your body? And sometimes it would be in my back, or I would get a lump in my throat, or I would just feel tense, or I would get a headache sometimes.
Mhm,
Um, one
mhm.
time I made you stop doing the fingers because I all of a sudden had to go um number two. So what is that about? Ho-
I'm really glad you brought this up, Michelle. I'm really glad because what that is an example of is feelings move around in our bodies. And throughout the whole EMDR session, feelings move around in our bodies, which is exactly what should be happening. What that is a sign of is the emotions processing inside of us, so it's just it's great because it's resolving. So then, not to get too graphic and gross people out, but you go to the bathroom, go poop, and then you feel better, and it's like it's released, right? It's there, our bodies have all these different ways of releasing, right? It'd be
yeah.
even through like burping. I remember I used to burp a lot in therapy when during the EMDR, and I've had clients do that too. Or they get nauseated and I have to get a trash can in case they throw up. And I have had clients throw up, and vomit during sessions, and that's okay. It's that release of they just
Wow.
have to get the feelings out, right?
Wow.
Crying's another really obvious way,
Yeah.
that probably most people do. Although I've had clients that couldn't cry, and then through working together, they now cry all the time. That that makes me really happy. That's success, right?
That is. Wow.
Mhm.
I love that. Okay. So it's part of the processing of
Mhm.
it getting out and moving through your body. Yeah.
Right. Moves around and yeah. So we focus on where it is, right? Notice your stomach, notice your head, and then we do the processing while you focus on that. And then if you have a thought or a picture of the memory to go with it, we add that in. But you can do it on anything. We can do it we call it somatically, just on body feelings and sensations.
Mm.
Oh, okay. So if you didn't even have a thing, some people have issues with chronic pain or something, but that could be them holding on to their issue that they don't even know. So they're focusing on the pain, and then as they work through the EMDR, the eye movement, uh, they can somehow discover what's causing their pain. Does that happen? Ever?
Yes, it does happen. Realizations come, even memories come back. Right. And just working with the body, we can do, and technically it's its own protocol. It's called somatic experience. Peter Levine is the one who came up with that, and David Grand is another one that does a lot with that. And brain spotting is something he does with just moving the fingers in places where you look and it processes it in with your brain. There are a lot of different techniques. So I've not been trained in either one. I started reading the brain spotting book because I find it really interesting, but I've not been trained on that or SE, but I feel like I know SE better, somatic experience, because of working so much with people's bodies where the emotions move around and where feelings are stored, right? Because our feelings are stored in our bodies. And what is it? The stomach is called, I heard from actually my therapist, I've had several different ones. One recent one that the stomach is holds all of our memories. And then I heard from someone else that it's like our second brain. And I think
Wow.
especially for women, because we tend to store our feelings in our stomachs. I think more women than men do. I think for men, it's more the head. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on. Like I said, I've mentioned EMDR several times, and how much it has helped me. So I wanted to bring on the expert to discuss how it works, and it's changed my life. So I want to get the word out there that not just therapy, but EMDR specifically, it is so helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's such a blessing to be with you both. I love your podcast. I want to commend you for doing it, compliment you on this podcast of Sister Confessions. It's so wonderful and so raw. And I love your vulnerability and how you share with each other and just spontaneously. And while I'm on the subject of sisters, I want to honor mine because above me is a picture of my two sisters. It's the three of us when we were little. And I thought, when we were beginning this, I thought, how cool it's up there. My older Stephanie lives in Paris, France, and she's 3 years older than me. And then I'm in the middle, of course, brown, the only brunette in the family. And my younger sister, Melissa, is 3 years younger than me, and she lives in Hawaii. And I love that picture of us. And I also have a stepsister, Patra, in Santa Barbara. And she's an artist and lives on the land up there. And super cool person. I just don't have a picture of her handy right here, but she's also very dear to our hearts.
I love it. Tribute to the sisters, the sisterhood.
That's right. Sisterhood is so amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So amazing.
Well, thank you, Michelle, so much for coming on and sharing. And I know that you have a wealth of information. So we'd love to, if you're available at some point in the future, circle back and share more of your expertise. And it's really just getting the word out and letting other people know they're not alone, and there's hope, there's help, and there's a lot of tools out there. And that's the whole point of us doing this podcast, is sharing our journey. And so thank you for being honest and vulnerable about what you've overcome and endured, and your journey too. So we appreciate
Absolutely. You're welcome. It's been really special to be here. I love sharing and teaching. And so thank you for having me. And I'm glad to come back whenever you want me to.
Right. Sounds great. All right, Michelle. Well, to be continued. Thank you, everybody who joined us, and join us next week for our next conversation. Bye.
Bye.